In this video, we're going to check out comments that viewers have left on my channel on their own UFO sightings. Now, Canada, which my channel focuses on, is, I think, the place with the second highest number of UFO reports. USA is number one by far. And then behind it, there's China and Great Britain and Canada, and I think depending on whose numbers you're using, Canada a lot of times comes in second place. We've got a couple very cool UFO stories. Two of them happened in 1967, I think, which is Canada's centennial year, when Canada turned 100 years old. One of them took place at Falcon Lake, Manitoba. And the guy who saw it was he's a Polish immigrant named Steve Michalak, I have to figure out how to pronounce that. But he saw this craft while he was looking for rocks in the woods. He was kind of like a geology enthusiast. And he kind of hailed it, said hello to it in like 7 different languages or something. He knew a bunch of languages and didn't get a response. And he went up to it and he got kind of blasted by it as it took off. And he had this kind of like grid-like pattern of radiation on his stomach and chest. Or a grid-like pattern, it was like a grid-like rash, and it turned out to be like severe radiation. He got like radiation sickness from it. But he did survive. He's long passed away now, but he did survive that incident. And I think it's safe to say that the authority on that subject is Steve Rutkowski. He's a big Canadian UFO guy. And Gary Munja-Coper actually sent me a pile of material on it. For as long as I've been doing this channel, I've had a dream of doing a big UFO video on Canada's Year of the UFOs, which was 1967. So there's the Falcon Lake incident, and then there's another one that happened in Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, just kind of near the southern end of the Nova Scotian peninsula. And that's an incident where people saw a mysterious craft fly from the air and go into the water. And then there was like, I want to say Canadian diving teams sent to recover it. And the expert on that is a man named Chris Stiles, another Chris, who kind of made it his life's mission to investigate that incident. And he's got some interesting theories, kind of like conspiracy theories about it, which are pretty cool. And then there was a third thing that happened that year, but I'm not going to say right now because I want to save it for that video if I ever get around to it. I've been wanting to do that video forever. But anyway, yeah, Canada has a lot of cool stories, but I think these stories that I've saved from comments on my channel are not exclusive to Canada. They're from all over the world. Now, I have to confess that of all the mysterious phenomena that I talk about on my channel, UFOs are the subject that I'm kind of least interested in and least familiar with. So I hope you can excuse my ignorance. Before we jump in, I thought I'd plug a related video that I made just last week on old native legends, which could be interpreted as extraterrestrial visitation stories. Stories of visitors from the stars or from the sky. I did that video in my old-fashioned style, and I made it for members only, so if you'd like to watch that video, you have to become a member of my channel, which costs like 70 cents a month. To do that, you click the picture of my face, and then click the join button, and kind of go through the steps, and it's 70 cents US a month. 72 cents, I think. $1 Canadian. But anyway, let's jump into the comments here. The first comment's from John Burbridge, 8757, 2 years ago. I'm familiar with the fiery orange orbs from living in Idaho through the turn of the millennium. In 2001, I camped out in my yard for the summer. On the most notable night, I was bewildered by this massive and solid sphere of light/plasma. The warm light radiated inward, unlike any example I can offer. I initially thought it was the moon, for lack of a better reference. However, this moon was at least 2 times the magnitude, 1 to 2 degrees of arc length versus the moon at 0.5 arc. I quickly realized that none of these observations were characteristic of the moon. As soon as this registered, I noticed the embering Death Star was slowly and silently crossing over my neighborhood. It seemingly sat somewhere over the trees, yet under mountains. It kept a fixed southeasterly vector, maintaining speed and altitude as it crossed closely overhead. I never found descriptions of bolides, I don't know what that is, or luminous events maintaining such a perfect sphere, without any trail or breakup wandering lazily over rooftops. It was too exotic to be a lantern. It would have been within 100 feet to create such a degree of arc for a lantern-sized object, about 1 meter. Earthlight seemed to be a fitting name for these plasma balls. Example, Hesdalen, Marfa, Min, Naga, etc. So he's referring, those are different phantom lights that people see all over the world. Kind of like Wills of the Wisp in the wilderness and stuff. But a natural piezoelectric effect hardly does justice to their orchestrated movements. The only hint of resolution I've found has been from researching NUFORC reports. What are NUFORC reports? Okay, NUFORC is the National UFO Reporting Center. Okay. There are several similar fiery orange orb reports from my small area, and thousands of these anomalous fireballs have occurred in Idaho alone. Furthermore, fiery orbs seem to be one of the greatest common factors among UFO reports since antiquity. Foo Fighters, aka Kraut fireballs, World War II, 1940s. Globes of fire, aka Flaming Shields, Italy, 100 BC to 42 BC. Orange spheres et al. In Battle, Nuremberg and Basel, 16th century. Church of the Solar Disk, Pharaoh Akhenaten, Egypt, 1347 BC. Are fiery orbits akin to reconnaissance drones? Could some plasma spheres be a function of gravitic mechanics? Are they fingerprints of wormholes? The shadows of higher dimensions. Some do reportedly dilate and contract, as would a higher dimensional structure passing in and out of our perceivable substrate, 3-dimension and +1. Are some fiery orbs more metaphysical as thought in will-o'-the-wisp phenomenon that permeates our cultures? Whatever the explanation, these anomalous fireballs have a deep root in our history, and I'm beginning to think the answer could be yes to all of the above. It should be stated that I attributed my 2001 encounter to something exotic yet prosaic, till the end of my undergraduate studies in 2016. The Chinese lantern hypothesis seemed at least plausible despite the total lack of justice and irresponsible practice in a fire-prone area. As a student of biology and botany, I fell in line with the attitude of needed evidence and the mockery that Project Blue Book, Robertson Panel, et al. Established for subsequent generations. It's fortunate that we are witnessing a new zeitgeist since the 2017 New York Times article. I think he's referring to when the CIA kind of came out and admitted that it had been studying UFOs. I think that's what it was. So I'm not quite sure I agree with the implication that this new zeitgeist is organic. Because if the CIA put it out, you know that they're not doing it because they have our best interests at heart. They're doing it for whatever reasons they do things for, shaping the public perception. So I'm not entirely sure this new wave of government transparency with the UFOs is entirely organic. That's just my conspiracy-minded brain. But anyway, he keeps going here. My inner dialogue throughout my 2001 fiery orange orb encounter. I knew I was going to see something before it even happened. I jumped up from laying in a tent in my front yard and rushed outside, knowing I can't miss whatever is about to happen. I looked to the right, and sitting over my neighbor's house was the embering sphere. First thought was, how can the moon be so big? Next thought was, how can the moon be on fire? I then noticed it was moving kind of slowly like a helicopter speed, but completely silent, and realized, I am not looking at the moon. Next thought was, why the hell didn't I grab my camera? I considered darting back to the tent to grab my camera, but immediately understood, I cannot afford to miss this. I tracked the fireball till it passed behind a spruce tree in the backyard. It saw that it was the spruce tree that blocked, and not the aspens that were further back. This makes me think the sphere was extremely close and smaller. If the object was 1 meter in diameter, it is only 57 feet away. If the object was more like 10 meters in diameter, it is only 570 feet away. From here, I either sprinted to the backyard, or possibly stopped by the tent on the way to the backyard. I can't remember what I did, and I can't remember seeing the thing again. It likely extinguished during my commute, and I don't remember because things were just mundane after that. What I do remember was abruptly walking in the tent, again later that night, repeating, I can't forget about the fireball. It's almost the same memory as the beginning of the sighting. I can also be trusted when I say this was not a dream. I've always had a deep fascination with dreams. I've kept dream journals, and have a long history of refining my ability to become lucid and recognize the dream space. And I'm sorry, I think I have to go back. When I was reading his thoughts during the encounter, I kept thinking, I think I'm conflating two things. It was the Pentagon that had like a program looking into what UFOs are, or like researching them. And I think it was the CIA that had a big dump of material. I gotta go back and check, but I think that's what it was. There was two separate things that happened around the same time, like in the last decade, I guess. So interesting, he knew it was going to happen before it happened, and then he had a feeling that he had to consciously try to remember it because he might forget. So that's cool. I wonder if we'll see any more themes like that in the rest of the stories here. So let's go to the next one. This comment's from Bulls Dawgug 3 years ago. I would like to share a personal experience that occurred in the late 80s. It's not a story I have shared very often. That said, after many years, I shared it online for the first time about a year ago. A few months ago, I posted my story again on YouTube. To save time, I have simply cut and pasted it directly from the comment section where I posted. Hope you find it of interest. If I had been alone at the time, I wouldn't be telling my story. However, I was with a friend and we both experienced the same phenomenon. Therefore, I am in no doubt this actually occurred. Back in the late 80s, my friend and I had gone out clubbing in the city centre of Manchester, United Kingdom. We started our night off at the now legendary club, the Hacienda. At the time, most clubs closed at 2 a.m., the Hacienda included. However, a short walk from the Hacienda was another club, the Number 1 Club, and it stayed open until 4 a.m. Our plan was simple. We would leave the Hacienda at 1 a.m. and finish off our night at the Number 1. The walk wasn't long, about a half mile, which should have taken us no longer than 15 minutes. At 1 a.m., my friend taps me and shows me his wristwatch to indicate it was almost 1 a.m., and it was time to go. So we set off for the Number 1. Along the way, we did stop at some park benches across from the GMX for no more than 5 minutes to have a quick smoke. This meant that if we left the Hacienda at 1 a.m., we would arrive at the Number 1 no later than 1:30 a.m., at the very extreme. When we arrived at the Number 1, the bouncers, who we knew, said, "Sorry lads, no more admissions, we close in 15 minutes. All we could think was that the club had started to close at 2 a.m. again instead of 4 a.m., so we asked if that's the case. 2 a.m.? You're having a laugh. It's 3:45 a.m., was a startling reply from the bouncer. My friend and I looked at each other in complete shock. For a second, we thought the bouncer was winding us up. Then I remembered my friend's wristwatch, the very watch I had looked at less than half an hour ago. So I asked him, what time does it say? We look at his watch, 3:45 a.m. For months and months after that night, my friend and I retraced our step over and over again. Both of us had the exact same memories, and we even could recall our conversation along the route. However, we had lived less than half an hour, but over 2 hours was added to that time, and I have no explanation for why that occurred. And no, it was not daylight savings. Also, even if we had left the Hacienda at 2 a.m. when it closed, we would still have arrived at the Number 1 over an hour earlier than we did. That night has haunted me ever since. So a case of missing time. I think that's why I must have included it in the UFO section, because so many UFO stories are associated with missing time, where people will see a UFO and then kind of black out and come to like hours later. I think the most famous early case of that is Betty and Barney Hill. They were driving, I think it was in New Hampshire. They were driving and they saw a UFO and then they blacked out and they were on the same road again like 2 hours later or something. And that's not the only story. There are lots of other stories like that where people will see a UFO and then kind of have a blank memory for a couple hours. And a lot of this, the really creepy part about it is that a lot of people who this happens to will kind of have that regression hypnosis therapy. And they'll have these all sorts of weird memories from what happened during that kind of space and time they can't remember. Or a lot of times, they get taken up by aliens into the spaceship and experimented on, and it's very scary, but the aliens are always saying, don't be afraid, and they'll stick what looks like medical instruments in private parts of the body, that sort of thing. So, story of missing time. Let's go to the next one. Coney, South Dakota 3 years ago. Did I ever tell you about my first duty station in eastern New Mexico, 1986 to 88? Our base had 3 UFO events in the short year and a half I was there, 2 of which I personally eyewitnessed from my post at the back gate. I was in military police and could see the entire base from there, because it was slightly more elevated than the rest of that very flat and featureless landscape. They were definitely interested in our nuclear storage silos area. They initially appeared as 3 orange pinkish orbs, but at some point merged into a single large orb. And just about the time the patrol units could get there, it winked out like a light. And of course we were ordered to strict silence, even threatened a bit. We were told not only could we not talk about it to our friends and family, but in this case, we couldn't even discuss it with other fellow cops, or would be subject to court-martial and imprisonment. I remember our squadron commander, a lieutenant colonel, seemed uncomfortable and slightly ashamed to give us that order, while trying to look tough and professional. I think he himself had been threatened from the base commander or higher. To make a very long story short, I'll just say my impression at the time wasn't aliens. Other co-workers thought it was aliens, but I was leaning towards time travelers from the future or past, or maybe an earthly species kept hidden from us, like from under the ocean or underground. Wow, that's a very interesting story. So he saw one on a military base, and what did he say it looked like? 3 orange pinkish orbs that merged into a single large orb, and then they winked out like a light. And so they were interested in the nuclear storage silo areas, which is like, that's kind of a common thing. You hear that a lot, that UFOs seem to be seen an awful lot around places with nuclear weapons. And then he was told not to talk about it. Very interesting. Next comments Ice Energy 3 years ago. Hey, I recently discovered my dad was involved in a pretty well-known supposed UFO case from Victoria, BC, back in the 80s, I believe. I would love to see what you were able to dig up on the case. I have a few newspaper articles about the incident and how my dad was apparently questioned by men in black. But my dad has always refused to speak to anyone about it. If the case intrigues you, send me a message, and I can link you the articles along with some other information on the case. Okay, interesting. A story from Victoria, and Men in Black. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know what the Men in Black are. But they're supposed to be, if somebody sees a UFO or has a strange UFO experience, a lot of times they're supposedly visited by these mysterious kind of government-looking people, dressed in black suits, maybe black hats or something. And I think there's some stories where they're supposed to look kind of uncanny, like they're masquerading as humans or something. But I'm not sure if that's a universal thing. I think it's a lot of times people just get visited by these government-looking people who tell them, it's in your best interest to forget about what you saw. Don't talk about this to anyone. Or sometimes they're just asking questions to see what they know and what they saw or what they thought they saw. So if I ever get more into the UFOs, I will definitely look this one up. From Gary Munja Chopra, I have a massive, massive UFO stack. But to be honest, I've never really been that interested in the subject. Even though I think there's absolutely something to it, because so many people have seen it, and now you have, the government releasing videos of UFOs and stuff. But the whole thing kind of reeks to me of PSYOP, to be honest. So I really have no idea what to believe about them. Anyway, let's go to the next one. This one's Sean New Bedford, 736, 2 years ago. HP, I've never told this to anyone because I've always been worried if I say it out loud it might happen. Alien/humanoid being that would come at night, and I would be powerless to do anything to stop it, save or fight for myself. I'm a 36-year-old man, and I know I sound like a baby, but yeah. So he's visited in the night by alien/humanoid beings, and he can't do anything to stop it. The skeptical part of me thinks that could be sleep paralysis, which it's a phenomenon where you're lying in bed and you kind of enter this state between being awake and being asleep, and your mind is kind of awake, but it's hallucinating, and your body is asleep, it can't move, and you'll see something horrible or have a feeling of a horrible feeling. A lot of times something will come and sit on your chest. This is, I think, a lot of the legends about succubus and incubus probably derive from this phenomenon. But who's to say it's completely a natural phenomenon? Maybe the sleep paralysis allows you to kind of temporarily see through the veil that separates us from the invisible world that we know is around us. And he's from New Bedford, which I think is in New England somewhere. And responding to his comment is Lily W. 719, 2 years ago. Already had that happen. Been there, done that, and it's no big deal anymore. Because I was lucky enough to know from the start that what was coming for me was demonic. So these dumb efforts just pushed me straight into the arms of their greatest enemy, the Catholic Church, to fix my problem, and that surely did the trick. All of those night terrors are demonic, and they're only allowed to do what God allows them to do. They're like his Rottweilers. He lets them off their leash occasionally in order to serve his purpose, which is to draw the soul. It looks like it's cut off here. I don't know if there's any more to that. So she thinks that these alien-looking things that bothered Sean New Bedford were demonic. Next comments, Garrett Burroughs 442, 2 years ago. I'm not going into the full long story, but I'm positive our government is testing Project Bluebeam. Last year, my girlfriend and I witnessed on 2 separate occasions military helicopters escorting a big black triangle with a red light on each tip. And the other time was a red-orange orb with a helicopter behind it. I thought, wait a minute, if Bluebeam is being used, they would need something to project from. A damn helicopter. We were duped. This was over mid-Michigan. Now, Project Bluebeam is, it's this idea that the U.S. government, and I think it was put forth by this pretty eccentric guy, I can't remember exactly who it was, but it's a conspiracy theory that the U.S. government is planning to have an event where they convince people that the Earth is under attack by extraterrestrials, like an invading force of extraterrestrials, and it's not true, but they're doing this to affect some end, maybe to kind of unite the countries together into a new world order or something like that. I think that's the idea. So to unite humanity against a common but imaginary enemy. Next comment's Medical Miracle 1, 2 years ago. 8 years ago, I've seen flashing white lights that resembles camera flashing zoom across the night sky. It made no sound, and around the time, drones were becoming popular, so I thought it was one. But a drone can't go 200 plus kilometers an hour like this thing was. Or maybe it was flying so low over my head, it made it look faster. But I would have heard it then, so I don't know. It was pitch dark night, and zoomed across the sky in less than 6 seconds. Hard to judge how high it was. Zero sound. And I could only see the light flashing. Next comment's Ellie Tobe 2 years ago. Quite a few years ago, there was this period of time in which there were UFO sightings in the area that I grew up in. It was the northeast part of the U.S. Every few days, the local newspaper, which was locally owned back then, would report that someone had seen a strange unidentified flying object. One evening, my mother and I decided to go outside during the evening to do our own investigation into this matter. We had been outside for about 20 minutes when we saw a lighted object in the sky coming towards us from the east. Being quite young, I thought that I would be funny and wave at the object. I stood up and waved my arm back and forth as though signaling to it. I never imagined that anyone inside would notice me, but the object stopped abruptly. It made no sound whatsoever. It hung there in the air, completely silent, 3 houses down and across the street from us. We had the distinct impression that we were being observed by someone, or something inside that thing. My mother said that we needed to get inside, and I did not disagree. As we were moving towards the door, we saw that the object began moving again, only it turned and moved to the south. The next day, the local newspaper reported that someone had seen a UFO in the town just south of us. Was it a government project? Was it an alien spacecraft? I have no idea. Why would someone conducting some secret project fly around an inhabited area like that? The sightings ended soon after that, and there were never any more that I know of. We did have some UFO sightings in New York City a few years ago. Funny how things like that are reported and then life goes on. We are so led by the corporate-owned media. So many people still trust the media, even though it is now owned by multinational corporations that have global elites as the major stockholders. We cannot count on the corporate-owned media to report the truth. So what struck me about this story was you keep seeing the theme that whatever these things are completely silent. They don't make any noise. You've seen that over and over in these comments. Okay, and then I have a note here. It says the comment below was made in response to the Anjakuni Lake video. So I made a video on, there's kind of an urban legend. I put it in a video on Canadian urban legends. I'll link to that in the description. But this legend is about, there was like an Inuit village, and I want to say, it was northern Manitoba. And I believe it was a trapper who discovered that all the people in there were gone. It was like they had just kind of vanished. This was like a kind of cluster of tents on the barrens on the tundra. And it was like nothing was packed up. There was like still food in the cooking pots. It was like a regular day for these people, but all the people were gone, and the dogs were chained up there starving. And this was kind of considered. It was investigated by the RCMP. Investigated not very well, if you follow what they did, but they kind of just dismissed it as this trapper telling tall tales. But anyway, that's what this is in response to. So the comment is, Maggie Rain, 1063, 1 year ago. This story happened again in 2000s. I went to Yukon to investigate. They said red sky fish light beings took neighbor village. People and dogs are visiting the other village, and never went home either. Not home for kids, dogs, grandmas. So taken. My elder sent me to go ask light beings why. The answer was as confusing as the story. I was sent because I had cancer, and was presumed to be half dead as lymphoma was then a death sentence. So it happened in Yukon, and they said red sky fish light beings took a neighbor village in 2000s. Creepy. Next one's playing with 3D 2 years ago. I remember a story from my older brother, so who knows if there was any sort of legitimacy to it, but he told me about this Inuit village back in the early 1900s, was asking for outside investigation to strange lights seen in the area. When the investigators got back to the village days or weeks later, the sled dogs were all tethered and starving or dead. Food was set out but not eaten in homes, but no villagers were ever found. I have no idea if that is real or just some BS my brother said to freak me out as a kid. So he's mentioning strange lights in connection to the Anjakuni Lake Vanishing Village story. Next comment's Bread Toasted 2269 3 months ago. I've never seen the little people, but I have seen UFOs in the skies regularly. Yes, in Ontario. I even spoke to the UFOs, and they appeared when I asked nicely. My friend who was with me got very frightened by the experience. So you asked them to appear, and they appeared. Interesting. Next one's Mark Paul, YM5WG 1 year ago. I saw a flying saucer Friday night. It was glowing white and was flying between 3,000 to 4,000 feet. The craft was super bright and flew over my house in the northeastern Tennessee, flying from east to west. I saw it coming from a long distance. I only wished I could have videotaped it. but I was mesmerized by it. I would say it was around 30 feet wide. We were sitting around a campfire in my front yard at 11 p.m. 3 of us saw it. The other guys said they never saw anything quite like it. Next one's John Melland 1 year ago. The best flying spacecraft I've seen was floating silently overhead of the drive-in theater in John Day, Oregon. A silver-skinned craft glowing or emitting a reddish-orange light. I could see windows near the top, and was the size of about 100 yards long, 75 yards wide. Oblong about 2 to 3 stories high. 1977-76. My mother tried to shove me under the back seat. I was able to see it from the back seat. It flew east to west, silent. My mom seen 2 or 3 beings in the windows in the top and bottom. She got the best look. It was going roughly 10 miles per hour, then disappeared from view. I've seen other things shooting at each other between 2 and 3 others. White dots like shots from one side, and the other side was white dashes type shots. Eddington, Maine, 10 p.m. at Friends Camp in the Woods, 2004. So a silver-skinned craft, glowing or emitting a reddish-orange light, with beings that are visible inside. And the next one is Fox Binos 2 hours ago. There is something going on in the mountain ranges between Canmore and Banff up to Jasper. Those ranges are huge. A lot of the areas people do not go to. I saw some stuff when I lived in Canmore. I saw metallic things come out of the mountains, way, way up high. Saw it a few times. Something huge. When I lived there, we heard the mystery booms a few times. The things people say is underground tunneling. So he's referring to the Canadian Rocky Mountains in kind of western Alberta, southwestern Alberta. And I think we've got just one more here. Potbelly Goblin, 2495, 33 minutes ago. So this isn't actually 33 minutes ago, so when I collected it, which maybe a few months ago. Will you ever do a video about flying object sightings from viewers? You're watching it. I've seen lights twice. I could give more details if you want. The first time, a red cloud of light flew over my house, split into 3 orbs, and moved over our house. The second time, it was like a set of headlights, floated down from the sky and exposed in a flash. And there was a weird technical phew sound when it flashed. The second one was a white light. Unfortunately, the blinds were drawn down, but we could still see it and hear it. And my dad saw a ball of light bounce down his concrete stoop stairs as a kid. He was little. This all happened in southern Wisconsin. The home where I saw the red light. Our TVs would turn on and off by themselves. So a red cloud of light that splits into 3 orbs. So I think that's the end of the comments on my channel about UFOs. So if you've ever seen something weird in the sky, please feel free to let me know in the comments down below. So thanks for watching, and before you go, I just want to remind you that I do have a new exclusive video out on native legends describing extraterrestrial visitations. So I'll put a link to that in the description in case you want to check it out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.